Looks like we are live on Facebook now. Welcome again to Mental Health Wednesday. We are again very close to the end of the year. These are our last remaining discussions about mental health. Today's topic is about depression and addiction in particular. Ms. R, do you want to go over a short synopsis of it?
Yeah, absolutely. This was a topic that our students wanted to talk about that they had reported on the form when they were interested in learning more about specific mental health challenges. And so, depression, I think, is very common, and a lot of people know that it's a prolonged sadness that, makes people isolate, withdraw. You could struggle with suicidal thoughts. It's just very, very difficult to get out of. And actually, it's this very similar with addiction, where both of these are on the more severe sides of like needing help. And so, outside of, you can't just like wait for depression sometimes to end, and you can't just wait for addiction. These are two mental health challenges that really need some what's it called, like intervention in order to stop. And so depression, we want to feel better. Sometimes people want to feel better right now, and so they can turn to a substance or some other activity to rely on feeling better, and that's how people typically can become addicted to an activity or a substance that makes them feel better momentarily. And so I make that connection to our students so that they can begin to understand that addiction typically has something underlying, that we want to feel better, whether it's anxiety, depression, or stress. And some people can turn to this external thing that actually ends up hurting them later on.
And we talked about last week for a little bit as well. Something that might seem like a great solution, can really be underneath it all debilitating you, and worsen just your depression in general, and push you into a spiral, a downward spiral. So I appreciate you listing a couple of those examples, some scary examples that might seem not that harmful, but if you become addicted to it, become pretty toxic for yourself and potentially for others. But you talked about like social media, video games, even,
Mhm.
whether that be on the computer or a console or even your iPhone or a tablet.
Yeah.
Yeah, games can come in a lot of different ways. Even
Yeah.
like spending money through shopping, or
Gambling.
yeah, gambling, eating, purchasing different things, drinks, stuff like that. Those can become addictive habits. Um,
Right.
so I appreciate you giving us examples of what addiction might look like.
Yeah, I think that, in the end, I don't want to validate and say like, oh yeah, you should become addicted to something because it helps, because really it doesn't. The point is that it helps momentarily, and that's why a lot of people think, wow, I feel so much better playing video games than I do doing my homework, because homework stresses me out. Homework makes me feel bad about myself. When I have homework now, in order to cope with my stress, I'll go and play video games instead. But when you play video games, is the homework still there? Yeah. Therefore, when you're done playing video games, you're still going to feel stress, and now maybe even more stress because your homework is piling up. And so, what are you going to do? Now your stress has increased. Now you're going to go back to playing video games even more. And it's a really vicious cycle. And so, when people say the only thing that makes me feel better is playing video games, okay, well, now we're saying that you're reliant on video games in order to make you feel better and less stress, when really what's going to help you reduce stress is confronting the thing that is making you feel stress in the first place.
So I think it's really important to also kind of define what addiction is. What are the symptoms to kind of identify if you are addicted to something?
Mhm.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit, Miss Lar?
Yeah. So an addiction is usually something, it's an activity or a substance, something that you add to your experience in order to feel pain relief or joy. Some people might, I think we compare it to those little like likes, those little hearts that you get on social media. They give you this like little bit of hit of dopamine in your brain, and it says, ooh, it feels really good to get a like. And so you might do it again. You might be posting things more often because you want to get the rush in your mind that comes from getting the like. And it could be anything really. I know that a lot of adults are addicted to caffeine because they can tell it gives them an absolute change in their mind. They feel better instantly. And so there are lots of things that we might do that makes us instantly feel better, but now we become reliant on those things in order to feel better. So that means anytime I'm sad, bored, lonely, instead of actually feeling these things, I don't want to feel them. So I'll go to the thing that makes me feel better, like the food, the caffeine, the shopping, the nicotine. And so we can go through difficult things. We can be sad. We can feel stress, and we don't need to cover it up or depend on something for joy like these external factors.
Yeah, I think definitely the repetition, and I mean we kind of scratch the surface in different conversations, but if you see and when I say repetition, if you see something that you commonly go to often, and you go overboard, and it really takes more priority than the things that are more important and substantial to you, then I think that's a pretty big indicator. Sometimes we get caught in this mixture, like, oh, this makes me feel good. This is actually taking me away from the world, this and that. I don't have to deal with my problems. But if we build a dependence and a reliance on it, and we're sacrificing other areas, other people, things that have some meaning and a sense of fulfillment and satisfaction in our life, it's a big problem. It becomes more and more, and the longer it goes, the deeper the hole you're digging yourself into. So we definitely want to acknowledge that it's much harder given the pandemic to become addicted to something where we've been basically kind of closed off from the rest of the world for over a year now. As things are getting back to normal little by little, I mean, we still have remnants of those things left over. And sometimes it's been a year, we forget how to navigate like the social environment, how to navigate really conversation, stuff like that. So, I mean, everyone's going through it. So I want to acknowledge that it's okay, because we're all human too. We're not perfect, but we strive to do better. And I think it takes self-awareness. And, you talked about admission of addiction for the first part. It's okay to admit and accept and acknowledge that there potentially is a problem.
Yes.
And I think sometimes, whether it be pride or whatever it may be, like you want to avoid it, you want to neglect the admission of it, or a variety of other things. We have to acknowledge that first and have to tackle. I mean, I think we talked about going through the problem rather than like trying to avoid it altogether. I think that's a big part of this conversation too.
Yeah, you make a really good point bringing up this kind of acknowledging that you have a problem in the first place, or else you're never going to get help. I think a lot of us who've ever known someone with an addiction that's really struggling with a dependency on something else that's hurting them, getting in the way of their priorities, denial is the first, they say is one of the cornerstones of addiction, is to say like, oh, no, I can stop anytime. I can stop playing video games anytime. I don't have a problem. You have a problem. There's different things that you could say to deny that you need video games in order to feel better. And it's not just video games, right? It's all of these other things that could make us feel better momentarily. But that addiction and depression do not get better until you acknowledge that it is happening for you. And so happening for you and also other people. One of the worst things you could say to somebody with depression is, oh, you're doing this for attention, or you're just faking it. And nobody gets help that way. Nobody gets help that way if someone says, I think I'm addicted to food. And they're like, you can't be addicted to food. Food tastes good. Everybody loves food. What? No, we need to take that seriously. And so that kind of language of, I think I'm addicted to something, I really need it in order to feel good, or I think I'm depressed and I haven't felt good in a long time. If someone can just acknowledge that and say, okay, it really sounds like you're struggling, maybe we should get you help because I don't know how. That's how we're going to, treat these problems.
Yeah, and I think, it's okay to acknowledge that sometimes the things that we do that we might become addicted to are things that we might not see are problems. Like, for example, you talked about food. I mean, I know definitely, a couple people that are addicted to working out, for example. Now, they're working on their health, but
Right.
it's become an addiction because it's starting to affect other areas of their life. There's no balance
Yeah.
there. So if you're spending too much money, too much time, and it's negatively affecting other departments, like, for example, you're not doing all of your work, um, you're disconnected from your friends, from your family, um, among so many other things, then that's not a great effect that it's having on you. Although it might seem good for your health,
Right.
if other departments are sacrificed and you don't have that balance, you don't have that sense of um, satisfaction and fulfillment in all departments. And I think that's what we have to be careful of as well. Not that we have to live in fear of like, oh, I can't do this, I can't do that, I can't say this, I can't say that. But we want you
Right.
to be aware of just what is deemed healthy, a balance of everything, mental, physical, emotional, all that. We want you to be balanced. Okay, that's that's the ultimate goal. So I think those are the things we want to mention on both ends, where it could definitely be very extreme and very bad, versus even some of the things that we might not seem negative. In a peculiar setting, it can be actually conducive to a negative environment for yourself. So yeah, those are two realms I just definitely want to scratch the surface upon and get the thought process going. But ultimately, we want you to be healthy.
Yeah, the idea that someone could be addicted to something that's good for you, I think that we hear addiction and we immediately think of something really bad like drugs or alcohol. And in actuality, you're saying no, people can be addicted to things that are initially like good coping skills. For example, I have nothing against video games. I have a Nintendo Switch. I love video games. The thing is that too much of a good thing can be really harmful to you when you're starting to ignore other areas of your life. Like we keep repeating the same things where if this is the only place you're feeling joy, if this is the only place that your brain is starting to light up and feel good, then maybe we need to look at other areas because it could be harmful in different ways. Drugs, alcohol, things that you ingest into your body will have physical effects on you, like physical harm, which is why we say, like addiction to alcohol and drugs does things to your internal organs, things like that. But being addicted to social media and video games, for example, isn't something that you ingest literally, but then it starts to change your mind. It starts to change your thoughts. Now you're suddenly becoming more aware and more obsessed with what people think about you, if it's social media, and you become more interested in the video game instead of real life. And so, yeah, I think that we don't talk about addiction enough. We don't talk about it as behavior. We don't talk about how it's a band aid to our other emotional problems. And to talk about it now in middle school, I think that a lot of our students have seen family members struggle with fixating on one thing in order to feel better, or they might know a friend that's starting to engage in these unhealthy activities more often. And so we just want to be aware of them. And the more aware you are of the symptoms, the more likely you are to be able to suggest somebody gets help sooner rather than later.
And I think the one of the ways to counteract addiction is the practice of discipline. And I know a lot of our students may think discipline, oh, it sounds like a word the military may use. And although it may be true, the type of discipline is very much aligned with what I said in terms of balance. I think realistically, like for example, I know a lot of students, my students in particular, if you're watching out there, spend too much time on video games where you end up sleeping at like 2 or 3 in the morning. An act of discipline would be like, hey, you know what? I'm gonna give myself 2 hours max of video game time, or I'm gonna give myself an hour. I'm gonna give 60 minutes. I'm gonna get 60 minutes here for homework. Maybe I'll get a half an hour break here and there. Maybe I'll go outside for a walk for 15 minutes. And giving yourself a time frame, a specific activity or a task, the way you treat yourself, how you talk to yourself, how you talk to others. You know, I'm gonna start using these phrases rather than these. I'm not gonna say why this, why that. I'm gonna ask myself, how can I do better, essentially. So the way you talk also, so you have to be very strategic, and that's where discipline comes, where you're being strategic about how to approach and how to say certain things. And I think that's a very big part, not only for addiction, but for a lot of other categories where you can find that balance. You can find like actual happiness in its purest form, because this is something that you are doing internally. Now, if it's something that's out of your hands that you cannot do yourself, obviously there are definitely resources and tools you can utilize, people that you can surround yourself, like we've talked about many other times in other discussions, that can help you. So surrounding yourself in a group, there are definitely, you know, support groups out there. I know for me, you know, one of the outlets is through sports. So I surround myself with athletes that are of the like mind, that are team oriented, that are conducive to basically building each other up and making sure we actually, so a lot of sports are based on roles too in some cases. So like for me, playing in a certain position on the field, I want to make sure I use all of my skills and my knowledge to the best of my ability, not only for myself but also for my team to eventually score goals and then eventually win the match as well. So I think those are different things to think about strategically so that you can find happiness.
Yeah, I mean, environment is such a big part of whether you engage in these coping skills in a negative way. You know, if I'm trying to quit nicotine, should I go and hang out with a bunch of my friends that are going to be smoking nicotine? Probably not. We want to surround ourselves with an environment that is going to help us be our best selves, our healthiest selves, whether it's physical health or mental health. And knowing that for yourself is a pretty big deal. To say like, I can't hang out with this friend because I'm going to do things that I don't want to, that are only going to make my mental health or my physical health worse, is a really big step for middle schoolers. And I'd like to empower them to start doing that now. I don't want to say, oh, you guys don't have the power of discipline. Yeah, you do. You can make the choice to say, I recognize and acknowledge that this is something that's difficult for me, and I'm going to make a better choice by surrounding myself with people that care, who will remind me to make positive choices, who are going to care about my mental and physical health over their good time.
Yeah, I think another thing to add to that is just like you mentioned it, actually knowing the limitations of like certain, even family members or friends. Like not, not everybody is the solution. It's okay to accept that. And I think
Yeah.
in that same regard, like, you know, tackling addiction, in some cases you can stop it cold turkey. Like, you know what, it's just done. I'm away with it. But sometimes, a lot of times, it's more gradual where you'll, make strides little by little. So it's not going to be, your addiction to this or that might be not be gone like right away. So yeah, those two scenarios, also just acknowledging that and understanding that it's going to take time and effort too. And yeah, if you, can, like I said, kill it cold turkey, great. But it's also building those better practices so you don't fall back into a type of deal as well. So those are things we want you to think about as well.
Yeah, with the cold turkey, just quitting something out the gate, I think is very hard because, like I said, if you're becoming reliant on something like video games and eating and shopping or drugs in order to feel better, for you to just say, okay, I'm going to stop those things, is to accept, oh no, all these other feelings are going to come up, like sadness, like fear, like anger. And it's like, how do I tolerate those feelings instead of going back to doing the thing that made me feel good temporarily? How do I feel joy without the thing that I became reliant on? And uh, bless our family and friends. And sometimes we need even one step further professional help, which is what we'll be talking about next week.
Yeah, so next week is our very last week of these discussions for the school year, which is pretty crazy. We've done so many different episodes, Miss Laura and I. So we just thank you for the audience members that have been there during the live sessions, commenting and watching. For those of you that have kept track of it on Instagram or watched the full episodes on YouTube, we continue to want to push you to seek better health in mental health, but also physical, emotional, and all those things. Make sure to utilize the resources that you currently have. And also for the summer, if there's things that you want to, programs that you want to follow up on and continue, please make sure to reach out to Miss Laura or your teachers and staff. But otherwise, there's one more week of these mental health support systems that are available. We look forward to ending on a high note, and we hope everyone is doing well.
Yeah, absolutely. See you all next week for our last Mental Health Wednesday. Thank you.